She broke into a vampire king's castle, looking for stolen medicine. But when the poor orphan rounded the corner clutching her rusted knife, she saw something that shattered her entire world. A portrait of a crowned woman with her dead mother's face. "Why is my mom in your castle?" she whispered to the white-haired vampire king frozen before her. When his crimson eyes met hers, centuries of pain cracked open. "Your mother," he breathed, "is my queen." Hello friends. Welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We want to know. The gray fever arrived in Ashwick on the back of winter winds, creeping through the lower districts like smoke under doors. Anna Brennan knew the sound death made now. She was only 8 years old, but she'd learned to recognize it in the wet, rattling coughs that echoed through paper-thin walls, in the way her neighbors stopped answering when she knocked, in the smell of herbs burned to mask decay. 3 years had passed since her mother died, or so the priests had told her when they'd wrapped Sonia's body in cheap linen and buried her in the pauper's field. 3 years of scrubbing floors at Gregor's butcher shop for copper coins. 3 years of sleeping on a straw mat in the corner of a room she shared with 5 other orphans. 3 years of trying not to remember the warmth of her mother's arms, the sound of her lullabies, the smell of herbs drying by their window. But Anna remembered everything. She remembered the small scar above her mother's left eyebrow, shaped like a crescent moon. She remembered how Sonia's hands had been gentle when she'd braided Anna's hair. She remembered the silver pendant her mother wore, a moon wrapped in thorns, and how it had caught the light when Sonia leaned over her bed to kiss her goodnight. Most of all, Anna remembered the last thing her mother had whispered before the fever took her. "Be brave, little star. No matter what happens, be brave." So Anna was brave. She was brave when hunger gnawed at her stomach, brave when the other children mocked her threadbare clothes, brave when Gregor's wife smacked her hands for working too slowly, brave when she counted her coins each night and realized she was still 3 months away from affording a proper grave marker for her mother. Then the gray fever came, and bravery wasn't enough. It started in the tenements near the docks. One morning, Anna woke to find old Mrs. Cora, who lived in the room below, and sometimes saved Anna crusts of bread, coughing blood into a rag. By afternoon, half the building was sick. By nightfall, the apothecaries had closed their doors, refusing to treat anyone who couldn't pay in silver. They're hoarding the medicine. A dock worker named Hugh spat, hunched in an alley where Anna was emptying slop buckets. The king's healers got warehouses full of remedies up in Umbra Keep, but they're saving it for the nobles. Let the rest of us rot, they will. Anna's hands had tightened on the bucket. Umbra Keep, the vampire king's fortress that loomed over Ashwick like a crown of black stone and ancient malice. Everyone knew the stories. King Stefan had ruled for 3 centuries, cold and distant, emerging only when vampire law demanded it. His castle was a maze of shadows where mortal servants disappeared and screams echoed through halls that remembered blood. No one went to Umbra Keep, not willingly, not if they wanted to come back. But that night, Anna knelt beside Mrs. Cora's pallet and watched the old woman struggle for breath. Cora had given her bread when Anna was starving, had mended her worn shoes with scraps of leather, had sung her to sleep on nights when nightmares of her mother's death made Anna wake up crying. "Please," Anna whispered to no one, to God, to the indifferent night. "Please, I'll do anything." The decision crystallized like ice. If the medicine was in Umbra Keep, she'd go get it. She'd steal it, fight for it, beg for it, whatever it took. Mrs. Cora didn't have days. None of them did. Anna waited until midnight, until the watchmen changed shifts and the streets emptied. She'd overheard Hugh describe the layout of the fortress. He'd been a castle servant once, before the vampire lords dismissed him for drunkenness. She knew about the servants' entrance on the eastern wall, the one that opened onto the kitchens where supplies were delivered at dawn. She took her only weapon, a rusted kitchen knife she'd stolen from Gregor's shop. It wasn't much, the blade was notched, and the handle wrapped in fraying cord, but it made her feel less helpless. She wrapped it in cloth and tucked it into her belt, hidden under her oversized tunic. The walk to Umbra Keep took an hour. The cobblestones were slick with frost, and Anna's breath misted in the air. The moon hung full and heavy overhead, casting the world in shades of silver and shadow. As she climbed the hill toward the fortress, the city fell away behind her, replaced by dead gardens and skeletal trees. Umbra Keep rose from the hilltop like a monument to eternity. It was massive, all black stone and iron spires, with towers that scraped the belly of the sky. Gargoyles perched on every corner, their stone faces twisted in silent screams. Windows glowed with cold blue light. Not fire, but something else. something that shouldn't warm anything living. The walls were smooth and impossibly high, and the main gates were sealed with iron bars as thick as Anna's body. But the servants' entrance was smaller, more human. Anna found it exactly where Hugh had described, a narrow door set into the eastern wall, half hidden behind overgrown thorns. She tested the handle. Locked, but the wood was old. She wedged her knife into the gap between door and frame, prying until something splintered. The door swung open with a groan that made her heart stop. Anna held her breath, waiting for guards to come running. Nothing. Only silence deep and heavy, the kind of silence that swallowed sound. She slipped inside. The corridor beyond was carved from stone, so dark it seemed to drink the light. Blue flames burned in iron sconces along the walls, but they cast no heat, only a cold illumination that made Anna's skin prickle. The ceiling arched high overhead, vanishing into shadow. The air smelled of stone and old blood and something else, something sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a sealed tomb. Anna moved quickly, keeping to the walls, her knife clutched in one trembling hand. She needed to find the healing chambers, the storerooms where medicine would be kept. But the castle was a labyrinth. Every corridor looked the same. Black stone, blue flames, endless doors that led to more darkness. She took a turn and found herself in a wider hall. This one was different. The walls were lined with tapestries, showing battles between creatures with fangs and wings, humans crushed beneath immortal feet. At the far end, a grand staircase spiraled upward into shadow. Anna started toward it. Maybe the storerooms were upstairs, but then she saw the archway to her left. It was taller than the others, framed by carved roses that looked too real, their thorns sharp enough to draw blood. Beyond it, moonlight spilled through tall windows, illuminating something at the center of the room. Curiosity pulled her forward. Or maybe fate. Maybe something that had been waiting 8 years for this exact moment. Anna stepped through the archway into a gallery. The room was circular, its walls covered in portraits of stern-faced vampires in elaborate clothes. They stared down at her with eyes that seemed to follow her movement, judging her, finding her wanting. But Anna barely noticed them. At the center of the gallery, illuminated by 3 shafts of moonlight that converged like a blessing or a curse, hung a portrait larger than all the others. The frame was gilded gold, carved with crescent moons and thorn vines. But it was the woman in the painting who made Anna's world tilt and shatter. She was beautiful. Young, no older than 25. She wore robes of silver and crimson, so finely painted Anna could see every fold, every shimmer. A crown rested on her head, not iron or gold, but something delicate, shaped like a crescent moon. Her hair was chestnut brown, falling in waves over her shoulders. Her eyes were hazel, warm and gentle, and sad. And above her left eyebrow, painted with meticulous detail, was a small crescent-shaped scar. Anna's knife clattered to the floor. She stared at the portrait, her vision blurring with tears she didn't understand. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not." But it was. The face was her mother's face. The eyes were her mother's eyes. The scar was the one Sonia had traced with her fingertip, while telling Anna stories about falling from an apple tree as a child. "Who are you?" The voice came from behind her, deep, resonant, ancient. Anna spun, and her heart stopped. A man stood at the gallery's entrance. Though man wasn't quite right. He was tall and impossibly graceful, moving with a predator's fluid certainty. His hair was long and silver white, flowing past his shoulders like captured moonlight. His skin was pale as death, luminescent in the dim light. He wore ornate armor of white and gold, every piece etched with intricate designs, and a crimson cape that seemed to drink the shadows. Chains of silver hung across his chest, and at his throat hung a pendant, a crescent moon wrapped in thorns, the same pendant from the portrait. The same pendant Anna's mother had worn, but it was his eyes that paralyzed her. They burned crimson, like embers in a dying fire, ancient and terrible and full of pain so deep it had its own gravity. This was King Stefan, the immortal ruler, the vampire who'd reigned for 3 centuries, and he was staring at Anna as if he'd seen a ghost. "I asked you a question, child." His voice was controlled, but something underneath it trembled. "Who are you, and how did you get into my castle?" Anna's mouth opened, closed. She looked at the portrait, then back at Stefan, then at the portrait again. Her thoughts were scattered glass, cutting in every direction. Finally, she pointed at the painting with a shaking hand. "Why is my mom in your castle?" The words came out broken, desperate. Stefan's crimson eyes widened. He moved closer, each step measured, as if approaching something fragile that might shatter or vanish. "Your mother," he repeated slowly. The tremor in his voice grew stronger. "What is your mother's name?" "Sonia." Anna's voice cracked. "Sonia Brennan. She died 3 years ago. They buried her in the paupers' field, and I watched them cover her grave with dirt. So why—" Her voice rose, fury and grief tangling together. "Why do you have a portrait of her wearing a crown? Why does she look alive when I know she's dead?" Stefan stopped moving. His face, already pale, went white as bone. He stared at Anna, really looked at her now, studying every feature, her brown hair, her hazel eyes, the shape of her face, the stubborn set of her jaw. "Sonia," he whispered, and the name sounded like a prayer and a curse. "Sonia Brennan." He swayed slightly, catching himself on a nearby pedestal. His hand gripped the stone hard enough that cracks spiderwebbed beneath his fingers. Anna watched this ancient vampire king, this immortal predator, look as if the ground had opened beneath his feet. "She told me she was dead," Stefan said, more to himself than to Anna. "The report said she'd fled, died of human frailty, wanted nothing to do with immortals or their world." His crimson eyes fixed on Anna with laser focus. "How old are you, child?" 8, Anna said. "Almost 9. Something in Stefan's expression shattered. He moved suddenly, dropping to one knee in front of Anna, bringing himself to her eye level. Up close, she could see the grief carved into every line of his beautiful, terrible face. 8 years, he breathed. "She disappeared 8 years ago, 3 months after I asked her to be my queen." His hand reached toward Anna's face, stopped inches away, trembling. "If you're 8 years old, if Sonia was your mother, then what?" Anna demanded, even though her heart was pounding so hard it hurt. "What does that mean?" Stefan's hand dropped to his chest, to the pendant at his throat. He pulled it free and held it in his palm. Even in the dim light, Anna could see it was identical to the one in the portrait, identical to the one her mother had worn. "It means," Stefan said, his voice raw with centuries of accumulated grief and sudden, terrible hope, "that Sonia didn't die 3 years ago. It means someone took her from me, hid her, and made sure I believed you both were lost forever." He looked up at Anna, and for the first time since entering the gallery, she saw not a vampire king but a man who'd been broken and was only now realizing how much had been stolen from him. "It means," Stefan continued, his voice dropping to something lethal and determined, "that you're my daughter, and someone has been lying to us both for 8 years. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, multiple sets, moving fast. Stefan's head snapped up, his expression hardening into something predatory and protective all at once. "Guards," he said. "If you found me, they'll know something's wrong." He stood in one fluid motion, his hand closing around Anna's wrist, gentle but unbreakable. "We need to leave. Now. Because if you found me, child, then whoever took your mother will know, and they'll come for you." "I don't understand," Anna whispered, but she let Stefan pull her toward a hidden door behind one of the tapestries. "My mother is dead. I watched them bury her. How can she be your queen?" Stefan looked back at her, and in his ancient crimson eyes, Anna saw truth burning like a star. "Your mother was taken from me," he said. "Someone with power and cruelty faked her death and kept her hidden. But if you're alive, if you found your way here, then maybe," his voice caught, "maybe she's alive too, and maybe the 8 years we lost can finally be reclaimed." The hidden door swung open, revealing a passage that descended into deeper darkness. The footsteps in the corridor grew louder. "Come," Stefan said, and there was command in his voice now, royal authority mixed with desperate paternal protection. "If you want answers, if you want to know why your mother's face hangs in my gallery wearing a crown, then trust me, just for tonight. Let me keep you safe while we figure out what was done to us both." Anna looked at this vampire king who claimed to be her father, at the portrait of her supposedly dead mother wearing a queen's crown, at the pendant that matched the one from her fragmented memories. She thought of Mrs. Cora dying in the slums, of 3 years spent believing she was alone, of her mother's last words, "Be brave, little star." Anna took Stefan's hand. "Show me," she said. "Show me why someone would steal my mother and leave me thinking I had no one." Together, they disappeared into the hidden passage. Behind them, the portrait of Sonia watched with painted eyes that held secrets 8 years in the making. And in the depths of Umbra Keep, in chambers where darkness held sway, something ancient and terrible realized that the child it had tried to erase had just found her way home. The gray fever would have to wait. Anna had a more important mystery to solve: how to bring a dead queen back to life, and what it meant to be the daughter of an immortal king who'd spent 8 years mourning a family he never knew existed. The hidden passage swallowed them whole. Stefan moved through the darkness with certainty born of 3 centuries inhabiting these walls, his hand wrapped around Anna's wrist, not tight enough to hurt, but firm enough that she couldn't pull away even if she wanted to. Which she didn't. Not yet. Not when her entire world had just been torn apart and reassembled into a shape she didn't recognize. The passage twisted downward, narrow and suffocating. Anna's free hand scraped against rough stone as she stumbled to keep pace. Behind them, she heard voices, deep, authoritative, vampire voices that made the air vibrate with power. The guards had reached the gallery. In seconds, they'd find the hidden door. Faster, Stefan urged. And there was something in his voice Anna had never heard from anyone before. Not from Gregor when she'd broken his best cleaver. Not from the priests when they'd told her about her mother's death. It was fear. This ancient, immortal king was afraid. For her, the passage opened into a chamber that stole Anna's breath. It was circular, carved entirely from black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Bookshelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, crammed with volumes so old their spines had cracked into leather fragments. A massive desk dominated the center, its surface covered in maps, letters, and strange instruments Anna didn't recognize. Weapons hung on racks, swords with blades that gleamed like captured starlight, crossbows that looked capable of piercing castle walls, daggers with handles wrapped in silver wire. But it was the walls between the bookshelves that made Anna's chest tighten. Every available space was covered in papers, sketches, and maps, all connected by red thread like a spider's web. And at the center of it all, pinned with silver tacks, was a drawing of her mother. "This is my private study," Stefan said, releasing Anna's wrist and moving to seal the hidden door behind them. She heard something heavy slide into place, a bar or lock, and the muffled voices of the guards faded. "No one enters here without my permission. We're safe, for now." Anna barely heard him. She walked toward the wall as if pulled by invisible strings, staring at the drawing of Sonia. It was done in charcoal, less formal than the painted portrait but somehow more intimate. Her mother sat beneath a tree, laughing, her hair loose and wild, flowers woven into the strands. She looked young, happy, alive in a way Anna had never seen her. "I drew that," Stefan said quietly, coming to stand beside her. 8 years ago. The night before she vanished. His voice was raw, stripped of the royal authority he'd worn in the gallery. We'd met in the Thornwood forest, in a clearing where moon roses grew wild. She was gathering herbs for medicine. She was a healer, brilliant with plants. I was hunting something that had been killing travelers. He paused. And when Anna looked up at him, his crimson eyes were fixed on the drawing with an intensity that made her chest hurt. "We weren't supposed to speak. Vampires and humans, we don't mix. It's forbidden by the High Coven." But she looked at me without fear, asked if I needed help tracking whatever had left the blood trail I was following. And "You fell in love with her," Anna said. It wasn't a question. Yes. The word was barely a breath, against every law, against all sense. I fell in love with a mortal woman who laughed at death and made flowers bloom in winter. Stefan turned to face Anna fully, and she saw the weight of centuries pressing down on him. We met in secret for months. She told me about her work, her dreams of opening a proper healing house where anyone could receive care regardless of wealth. I told her about the burden of immortality, the loneliness of outliving everyone you've ever cared for. He stopped, searching for words. We were each other's escape from worlds that didn't fit us. Anna's throat was tight. Then what happened? Stefan moved to his desk, pulled open a drawer, and withdrew a small box carved from dark wood. He opened it carefully, as if the contents might shatter, and held it out to Anna. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a ring. Simple silver, set with a stone that caught the blue flame light, and held it not a diamond, but something that looked like captured moonlight. "I asked her to marry me," Stefan said. "Knew it was impossible. Knew the coven would never allow it, but I asked anyway, because loving Sonia had taught me that impossible things could be worth dying for." His jaw tightened. She said yes. She said she'd been waiting for me to ask. Said she had something important to tell me, something that would make it even more complicated, but also more necessary, that we find a way to be together. Anna stared at the ring, her mind working through the timeline. She was pregnant. I believe so, though she never got the chance to tell me. Stefan closed the box with a soft click. The night after I proposed, I had to attend a council session vampire politics that couldn't be postponed. I told her to stay in the cottage I'd prepared for her, somewhere safe where the coven couldn't track her scent. I promised to return before dawn. His voice went hollow. When I came back, she was gone. The cottage was empty. No signs of struggle, no blood, nothing. Just a note in handwriting I didn't recognize, saying she'd realized she couldn't live with a monster and had fled to the southern territories. But that was a lie, Anna said. Yes, but I didn't know that then. Stefan set the box back in the drawer and closed it with more force than necessary. My guards searched everywhere. I burned through every favor, every alliance, trying to find her. 6 months later, one of my scouts reported that Sonia Brennan had died of fever in a slum tenement in Ashwick, said there'd been a burial, witnesses, records. He looked at Anna. I had no reason to doubt it. Why would I? I thought she'd left me and died thinking I'd let her go. I thought. His voice cracked. I thought I'd failed her. Anna's vision was blurring, hot tears spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. She never left you. Someone took her. Someone faked the note, faked the death records, and... She choked on the words. And what? Kept her alive long enough to have me, then killed her anyway? Why? Why go through all that? Because of what you are, Stefan said. And there was something fierce and protective in his voice now. Something that made Anna think of wolves guarding their young. Because a child born of vampire and mortal blood breaks every natural law. Because the High Coven has spent millennia maintaining the barrier between our species. And a child who could bridge that gap would threaten everything they've built their power on. He crossed to one of the bookshelves and pulled down a massive tome bound in dark leather. The pages crackled as he opened it, and Anna saw text written in a language she didn't recognize, alongside illustrations of creatures that looked like nightmares given form. This is the Codex of Blood and Starlight, Stefan said, one of the oldest vampire texts in existence. And this... He pointed to a page marked with a black ribbon. This is why someone stole your mother and tried to erase you both from existence. Anna moved closer, squinting at the strange text. Stefan began to read aloud, translating as he went. When mortal dawn and endless night conceive a child between, the Daywalker shall rise neither living nor undead, bearing the sun's blessing and the moon's curse. They shall unite the realms in twilight peace or drown both in eternal night. The words hung in the air like a pronouncement of doom. Daywalker, Anna whispered. What does that mean? Stefan's crimson eyes found hers. It means you're not human, Anna. And you're not vampire. You're something that shouldn't exist according to every law of nature and magic. Something powerful enough to either save both our species or destroy them entirely. He knelt before her again, bringing himself to her level. And that makes you the most dangerous creature in this kingdom. To the High Coven. To the vampire nobility who profit from keeping humans subjugated. To anyone who benefits from the current order. Anna's legs felt weak. She sat down hard on the stone floor, her mind spinning. But, I'm nobody. I scrub floors. I can barely read. I'm not powerful. I'm not dangerous. You broke into my fortress undetected, Stefan pointed out gently. You navigated past guards who've been trained for decades to detect intruders. You found your way to the one room in this entire castle where your mother's portrait hung. And... He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her hand. You're sitting in a room lit by cold flame, which burns at temperatures that would kill any human in minutes, and you feel nothing but warmth. Anna looked around and realized he was right. The blue flames that had made her skin prickle in the corridors felt almost pleasant here, like sitting near a comfortable hearth instead of an inferno. The prophecy speaks of 3 marks, Stefan continued. 3 signs that identify the Daywalker. We'll need to test them, to be certain. But Anna, his voice softened. Whether you have those marks or not, whether you're the Daywalker or simply my daughter, someone powerful wanted you dead, wanted your mother silenced. And if they discover you're alive, if they realize you've found me, they'll stop at nothing to finish what they started 8 years ago. Anna's hands clenched into fists. Who would do this? I have suspicions, but no proof. Stefan stood and began pacing, his movements restless and predatory. The High Coven controls vampire society through fear and tradition. Any threat to their authority is eliminated without mercy. But orchestrating something this elaborate, keeping it hidden from me for 8 years. He stopped, his expression darkening. That would require someone with intimate knowledge of my movements, someone I trusted. A name hung unspoken between them, heavy as a death sentence. Your brother, Anna said, remembering the whispered stories from the slums. Lucien. People say he's the Coven's champion, that he enforces their laws without question. Stefan's jaw tightened. Lucien has always been ambitious, always resented that I inherited the throne instead of him. But this... He looked at the wall of papers, the red threads connecting dots that led to nowhere. This would be treason on a scale that could start a civil war. Then we find proof, Anna said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. She stood, wiping the tears from her face with the back of her hand. You said my mother might still be alive. You said someone went to great lengths to keep us apart. So we find out who, we find out why, and we find my mother. Stefan stared at her, and something shifted in his expression, grief giving way to determination, despair transforming into purpose. You sound like her, he said quietly. That same steel wrapped in kindness, that same refusal to accept defeat. She taught me to be brave, Anna said. Even when I'm terrified, even when everything's falling apart. She looked up at this vampire king who claimed to be her father, this immortal creature who'd spent 8 years mourning a family he'd never known existed. So what do we do? How do we find her? Stefan moved to the wall of papers and placed his hand on a map of the Northern Territories. I've been tracking unusual magic signatures for years, powerful enchantments that require constant renewal. There's one here, he pointed to a location marked with a red pin. Ravencross Monastery, abandoned for decades, supposedly cursed, but the magic signatures suggest something else, something being kept alive against its nature. You think she's there? I think it's where I'd hide someone I needed alive but silenced. Stefan pulled the map down, rolled it carefully. It's 3 days' ride, but I can make it in 1 night using the shadow paths. You'll need to come with me. I won't risk leaving you here where Lucien's spies might find you. Anna nodded, even as terror and hope warred in her chest. When do we leave? Now. Stefan moved to the weapon racks, selected a small dagger with a jeweled hilt, and held it out to Anna. Your rusted knife won't serve you where we're going. This has been in my family for 2 centuries. It's yours now. Anna took the dagger, felt its perfect balance, saw her reflection in the polished blade. She looked different somehow. Older, harder, like someone who'd just discovered her entire life was built on lies. Stefan, she said, the name feeling strange on her tongue. Not father, not yet. She wasn't ready for that. What if we're wrong? What if she really is dead and we're chasing ghosts? The vampire king looked at her with eyes that had seen centuries of sorrow and loss. Then we'll know the truth, he said simply. And we'll make sure whoever stole her from us pays in blood and screaming. He offered his hand. But I don't think we're wrong. I think somewhere in those mountains, your mother is waiting for someone to find her. And I think she's been waiting for 8 years. Anna took his hand, this stranger who was her father, this immortal who'd loved her mortal mother across impossible divides. Then let's go bring her home. Together, they stepped toward the shadows that would carry them north. Behind them, in the desk drawer, the moonstone ring waited in its velvet case, a promise made 8 years ago that might finally be kept. And on the wall, Sonia's charcoal portrait smiled, as if she'd been waiting all along for exactly this moment. The hunt for the sleeping queen had begun. The shadow paths were not like walking through darkness. They were walking through the space between darkness and light, through corridors that existed in the cracks of reality, where neither sun nor moon held sway. Anna clung to Stefan's hand as the world blurred around them, her stomach lurching with each impossible step that carried them miles in seconds. When they emerged, she stumbled, and would have fallen if Stefan hadn't caught her. They stood in a clearing deep within forest, so ancient the trees looked like they remembered the world's first dawn. Moonlight filtered through branches thick as castle towers, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. We're still an hour from Ravencross, Stefan said, releasing her arm once she'd steadied. But I need to know what you're capable of, before we face whatever waits there. The shadow paths drain mortal stamina. How do you feel? Anna took stock of herself, expecting exhaustion. Instead, she felt strangely energized, as if the darkness they'd traveled through had fed something inside her, rather than depleted it. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Stefan's crimson eyes studied her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. The first test, he said. Fire, he gestured, and a flame appeared in his palm, not cold blue like the castle's torches, but warm and orange, real fire that crackled and danced. Vampires and fire are ancient enemies. Even I, with 3 centuries of power, feel pain from direct contact. He held the flame toward her. Touch it. Anna hesitated. Every instinct screamed that fire meant pain, meant danger, meant scarred flesh and screaming. But she thought of her mother's portrait, of 8 stolen years, of Mrs. Cora dying because Anna hadn't been brave enough, fast enough, strong enough. She reached out and placed her hand directly into the flame. Warmth washed over her palm. Pleasant, gentle, like sunlight on skin. The fire curled around her fingers as if greeting an old friend, and she felt no pain. None at all. Extraordinary. Stefan breathed, extinguishing his flame. The Codex spoke true. The Daywalker bears the sun's blessing. Fire recognizes you as kin, not enemy. He pulled a silver coin from his pocket, held it up so moonlight caught the metal. Second test. Silver. He placed the coin in Anna's outstretched palm. She'd seen what silver did to vampires, had heard stories of vampire hunters using silver-coated weapons to burn through immortal flesh like acid. She expected agony. Instead, the coin felt warm. Not burning, just pleasantly heated, as if it had been sitting in summer sun. She closed her fingers around it and felt only gentle pressure. No pain, she confirmed. Because you're not fully vampire, Stefan explained, tucking the coin away. Silver recognizes mortal blood and shows mercy. You walk between both worlds, claimed by neither, rejected by neither. He moved closer, and his voice dropped. Third test. This one may be uncomfortable, but I need you to trust me. Anna nodded, though her heart had started hammering. I'm going to attempt a compulsion, Stefan said. A mild one. I'll simply suggest that you sit down. For a normal human, it would be irresistible. They'd obey without thought, without question. If you're truly the Daywalker, it should feel like... His crimson eyes flared, and Anna felt something press against her mind. Not painful, but insistent, like a voice whispering beneath her thoughts. Sit. You're tired. Sit down. Sit. She recognized the intrusion immediately and, without thinking, pushed back. The compulsion slid away like oil on water, unable to find purchase. Stefan's eyes widened. You didn't just resist, you actively deflected it. I felt your mind push mine away. He looked shaken and awed in equal measure. Anna, do you understand what this means? The High Coven's greatest weapon is compulsion. They control lesser vampires, manipulate humans, maintain order through mental domination. And you're immune, so they can't control me, Anna said slowly. Which makes me dangerous to them, which makes you a threat to everything they've built. Stefan began pacing, his movements sharp with tension. For millennia, the Coven has maintained the barrier between species by ensuring vampires remain superior. We're stronger, faster, immortal, and we can control mortal minds. That imbalance is how they justify keeping humans subjugated, how they maintain the feeding territories, the blood tithes, the fear that keeps both species separate. He stopped and looked at her. But you break that balance. You can walk in sunlight without burning, touch silver without pain, and resist compulsion. You're living proof that the barrier can be crossed, that vampire and human can create something that transcends both. Anna's mind was reeling. And that's why they took my mother, why they faked her death. Anger began building in her chest, hot and righteous. They wanted to kill me before I was born, but she convinced them otherwise. She bargained for my life. I believe so, Stefan said quietly. Your mother was brilliant and brave. If she told them you could be controlled, raised as a weapon for the Coven's purposes, they might have agreed to let you live, at least long enough to see if the prophecy held true. His expression darkened, but someone would have needed to enforce that agreement. Someone powerful enough to orchestrate the entire conspiracy. Your brother, Anna said. Lucien. Stefan's jaw tightened until she thought she heard bone creak. My half-brother, born of my father's second wife after my mother's death. He's always been ambitious, always believed he deserved the throne more than I did. When our father chose me as heir, Lucien swore loyalty, but I saw the hatred in his eyes. He moved to a fallen log and sat heavily, centuries of weariness in the gesture. 20 years ago, the High Coven made him their champion, their enforcer. He's the one who hunts rogue vampires, who executes those who break Coven law, who maintains order through fear and brutality. If anyone had the power and motive to orchestrate Sonia's kidnapping, it's him. Anna thought of the man who'd stolen her mother, who'd arranged for Anna to grow up alone and poor and terrified, who'd condemned Mrs. Cora and countless others to death because keeping humans weak served the Coven's purposes. Rage filled her, clean and cold and sharp as the dagger at her belt. "I scrubbed floors for 3 years," she said, her voice shaking. "I went hungry so often I forgot what being full felt like. I watched neighbors die of diseases that could have been cured with medicine. Vampires hoarded in their fortresses. I believed I was alone." She looked at Stefan, and all the grief and fury of 8 stolen years poured into her words. "You're telling me my mother is alive somewhere, trapped in some kind of magical sleep? And you've been here in your castle mourning? Why didn't you find her? Why didn't you find us?" The words hit Stefan like physical blows. His head bowed, silver hair falling forward to hide his face. When he spoke, his voice was raw. "I looked. For years, I looked. I burned through every favor, every alliance I'd built over 3 centuries. I interrogated vampires until they begged for death. I tore apart human settlements looking for any trace of her scent, her magic, her presence." He looked up, and Anna saw tears tracking down his pale cheeks. Vampire tears that glittered like crushed diamonds in the moonlight. But someone very powerful covered their tracks. Someone who knew exactly how to hide you both from me. They used silver to mask Sonia's scent, blood magic to conceal her life force, forgeries to create a paper trail of death and burial. By the time I arrived in Ashwick, the grave was already filled, the records already falsified. I had no reason to doubt she was dead. "But you should have known," Anna insisted, even as something in her chest twisted at the pain in his voice. "If you loved her, you should have felt it. Should have known she wouldn't just abandon you." "I was a fool," Stefan agreed simply. "I let pride and grief blind me. The Coven told me she'd left because I was a monster, because no human could truly love a vampire. And I believed them. Believed I'd driven her away with my nature, my curse." He stood and moved toward Anna, stopping just outside touching distance. "But you're right to be angry. Right to rage at me. I failed her. I failed you. And if I could trade every year of my immortal life to go back and search harder, look deeper, refuse to accept the lies, I would." In a heartbeat, the sincerity in his voice, the naked grief on his ancient face, took the edge off Anna's fury. Not all of it, she'd carry this anger for years, probably, but enough that she could breathe past it, enough that she could see past her own pain to recognize his. "We can't go back," she said finally. "But we can go forward. We can find her. We can make them pay for what they did." She met his crimson eyes with her own hazel ones. "So teach me, if I'm this Daywalker thing, if I have these powers, show me how to use them." Stefan nodded slowly. "All right. But Anna," his voice softened, "this path we're walking, it leads to war. The Coven won't let you exist once they know for certain what you are. They'll send armies, assassins, everything they have to eliminate the threat. And Lucien..." He paused. "Lucien will stop at nothing to protect his position and power. If we do this, if we rescue your mother and expose the conspiracy, you'll be painting a target on your back that will never fade." Anna thought of Sonia's face in the portrait, young and crowned and waiting. She thought of Mrs. Cora's rattling breath, of children orphaned by a plague that didn't need to kill. She thought of all the ways the world was broken, and all the ways she'd learned to survive in the cracks. "If she's alive," Anna said, "we find her. I don't care what it costs." For the first time since they'd met, Stefan smiled. It was small, sad, but real. "You sound exactly like her," he said. "That same stubborn fire. That same refusal to abandon hope." He held out his hand. "Then we begin. The Daywalker prophecy speaks of 3 gifts: sun's blessing, moon's curse, and the bridge between life and death. We've confirmed the first 2. The third," he hesitated. "The third is harder to test. It requires you to reach beyond yourself, to sense the life force in living things." "Close your eyes." Anna obeyed. In the darkness behind her eyelids, the world didn't disappear, it transformed. She became aware of warmth all around her, pulses of energy that felt like heartbeats. To her left, Stefan's presence burned cold and bright, immortal fire that had been burning for centuries. To her right, the forest thrummed with countless tiny lives, insects, birds, small animals going about their nocturnal business. "What do you feel?" Stefan asked. "Everything," Anna breathed. "I can feel you, you're like ice on fire. If that makes sense. Cold but alive. And the forest is..." She struggled for words. "It's like a symphony. thousands of tiny notes all playing at once. Now reach further, Stefan urged. Beyond the forest, north toward the mountains. Tell me what you sense. Anna pushed her awareness outward, following the thread of Stefan's cold fire north. The forest fell away, replaced by rock and wind and empty spaces. Then, at the very edge of her perception, she felt it. A single warm pulse, faint but steady, like a heartbeat wrapped in cotton. Human, alive, sleeping. Her eyes snapped open. There's someone there, at Ravencross. Someone human, alive, but muted. Like they're dreaming so deeply they've almost forgotten how to wake up. Stefan's face had gone absolutely still. That's her, he whispered. That has to be her. Anna, you just sensed a life force from miles away. That's not just Daywalker power, that's something more. Something the prophecy didn't predict. His hand found her shoulder. Which means you're more dangerous to the Coven than anyone imagined. A harsh cry split the night. Both of them looked up to see a raven circling overhead, its wings cutting through moonlight. It descended in a spiral and landed on a nearby branch, fixing them with eyes that glittered with intelligence far beyond normal birds. Attached to its leg was a scroll sealed with red wax. Stefan's expression went cold as winter iron. He gestured, and the raven hopped to his arm. He untied the scroll, broke the seal, and unrolled it. As he read, his face transformed from merely cold to something murderous. What is it? Anna asked. Stefan's hand crumpled the parchment, his knuckles white with fury. When he spoke, his voice was lethal. A message from Lucien. He knows you're alive, knows you're with me. He looked at Anna, and in his eyes she saw the vampire king, the immortal predator, the creature who'd ruled for 3 centuries through blood and fear. He's giving me an ultimatum. Surrender you to the Coven for judgment, or he burns my kingdom to ash. I have until the Blood Moon Summit in 3 days. Anna's hands clenched into fists. Let him come, she said, and was surprised by the fury in her own voice. Let him try. We're not giving him anything. We're taking everything back, my mother, my childhood, my life, all of it. Stefan looked at this fierce, broken child, his daughter, and saw something in her that had been missing from his own reflection for centuries. Purpose, hope, the willingness to fight for something beyond mere survival. Then we go to Ravencross, he said. Tonight. Now. Because if Lucien knows about you, your mother's life just became much more valuable, or much more disposable, and I will not lose either of you again. He held out his hand. Anna took it without hesitation. Together, they stepped back into the shadow paths, racing against time and treachery toward a sleeping queen who'd been waiting 8 years to wake up. Behind them, the raven watched with eyes too knowing, then spread its wings and flew north, carrying news of the Daywalker's awakening to those who feared her most. The hunt had become a race, and the kingdom that had stolen Anna's family was about to learn what happened when you gave a Daywalker a reason to burn. Ravencross Monastery clung to the mountainside like a corpse refusing to fall. The shadow paths deposited Stefan and Anna at the base of the cliff, and Anna's first glimpse of their destination made her stomach clench with dread. The building was a ruin, walls crumbling, roof collapsed in places, towers that had once reached toward heaven now broken and listing like rotted teeth. Dead trees surrounded it, their branches twisted into shapes that suggested screaming. Mist coiled around everything, thick and unnatural, smelling of decay and old magic. It was a place of healing once, Stefan said quietly, his crimson eyes scanning the ruins with predator focus. Monks who tended the sick, grew medicinal herbs, offered sanctuary to travelers. His jaw tightened. Lucien corrupted it, turned a place of life into a prison. It's fitting, in a way that makes me want to burn it all down. Anna reached out with her newfound senses, feeling for the warm pulse she detected from miles away. It was there, stronger now, directly ahead and deep underground. But surrounding it, pressing against her awareness like thorns, were other presences, cold vampire signatures, and something else. Magic, traps woven into the very stones, designed to alert, to harm, to kill. The entire monastery is warded, she whispered. I can feel them. They're like... She struggled for words. Angry red lights in my mind. If we just walk in, they'll know immediately. Stefan looked at her with something between pride and fear. Can you navigate around them? Anna closed her eyes and let her awareness expand. The wards were complex, layered, but they followed patterns, geometric shapes that created a net of detection. But where there were patterns, there were gaps. spaces between the threads where something small and careful could slip through. "I think so," she said. "But we have to move exactly where I tell you. No deviation." They climbed the cliff path in silence, Anna leading with her eyes half closed, following the safe corridors only she could perceive. Stefan moved with absolute trust, his hand on her shoulder, letting this 8-year-old child guide him through defenses that would have taken vampire mages years to map. Twice they had to stop and wait while patrol patterns shifted. Once they pressed flat against a wall as a ward pulse swept past them, close enough that Anna felt its heat but not its bite. When they finally reached the monastery's entrance, Anna was shaking with exhaustion. Reading the magical landscape took concentration she wasn't used to sustaining, but they were inside. And as far as she could tell, no alarms had been triggered. The interior was worse than the exterior. Hallways stretched into darkness, their floors littered with broken stone and dried blood. Shadows moved wrong here, seeming to reach toward them with hungry fingers. The air was thick with the residue of dark magic sacrifices made, lives stolen, pain crystallized into power. They descended. Down crumbling stairs, through corridors that narrowed until Anna's shoulders brushed both walls, into depths where even moonlight feared to follow. Stefan's eyes began to glow faintly, providing crimson illumination that made everything look painted in old blood. Then they heard voices. Stefan's hand shot out, stopping Anna mid-step. Ahead, the corridor opened into what might have once been a chapel. 2 figures stood guard vampire soldiers in black armor, their backs to the hallway, their attention focused on a door carved with symbols that made Anna's eyes water. Stefan's hand moved to his sword, but Anna grabbed his wrist. "If we kill them, Lucien will know immediately," she breathed, barely audible. "The wards are tied to their life forces. They die," he's alerted. "Then what do you suggest?" Stefan's voice was equally quiet, strained with the need for action. Anna didn't know. She just knew that violence would trap them, would alert every vampire in the monastery before they could reach her mother. She needed another way. A gentler way. She thought of Mrs. Cora singing lullabies through thin walls, of her mother's voice humming as she'd worked with herbs, of the feeling of being safe enough to sleep. Anna reached out not with her hands but with that part of herself that sensed life forces. She touched the guard's awareness, felt the sharp alertness that kept them standing rigid and watchful, and instead of trying to control them the way vampires would, she simply suggested, "You're tired. You've been standing so long. Just close your eyes for a moment. Just rest." It felt natural, kind, like tucking someone into bed and promising the nightmares would stay away. Both guards swayed. Their eyes fluttered. One leaned against the wall, then slowly slid down to sit. The other followed, his head dropping forward onto his chest. Within seconds, both were breathing with the deep rhythm of genuine sleep. Stefan stared at Anna, his expression caught between awe and terror. "How did you do that?" "I don't know," Anna admitted. Her hands were shaking. It just felt right. Like singing someone to sleep instead of forcing them unconscious. "That's not vampire compulsion," Stefan said slowly. "That's something else entirely. Something more dangerous because it doesn't feel like an attack." He looked at the sleeping guards, then at Anna. The Coven would fear this more than any weapon. Compulsion can be resisted, fought. But kindness. He trailed off, shaking his head. They moved past the guards to the carved door. It wasn't locked, why would it be? With guards and wards and an enchanted prisoner who couldn't wake. Stefan pushed it open, and they descended one final flight of stairs into a chamber that stole Anna's breath. It was circular, carved entirely from black stone, so smooth it reflected the light of dozens of candles arranged in precise geometric patterns. The flames burned purple, casting everything in shades of bruise and shadow. At the chamber's center, on a raised platform of white marble, lay a woman, Anna's mother. Sonia looked exactly as she did in the portrait, unchanged by 8 years of magical sleep. Her chestnut hair spread across the marble like silk. Her face was peaceful, beautiful, untouched by time or suffering. She wore simple healer's robes, the same ones Anna remembered from childhood, but binding her wrists and ankles were chains made of silver light, pulsing in time with the purple candles. Stefan made a sound small, broken, barely human. He crossed the chamber in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside the platform. His hands hovered over Sonia's face, trembling, as if he feared she might dissolve at his touch. "Sonia," he breathed. "My light. My life. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't find you sooner." Then his composure, held together for 8 years through sheer will, shattered. He bent over Sonia's still form, his forehead pressing against her clasped hands, and wept. Great, gasping sobs that shook his entire frame. Centuries of grief and guilt and desperate love poured out in tears that glittered like crushed diamonds in the purple light. Anna stood frozen, watching this ancient vampire king break apart over her sleeping mother. Part of her wanted to rage at him for taking so long, for not finding them sooner. But watching him now, seeing the raw, agonizing love in every line of his body, she understood. He hadn't given up. He'd mourned them as dead because someone had made certain he'd believe it. She climbed onto the platform and sat beside her mother. Up close, she could see the enchantments work. Beneath Sonia's skin, veins of purple magic pulsed like a second circulatory system, threading through every inch of her body. The magic wasn't killing her, it was sustaining her, keeping her suspended in the moment before death, but never crossing that final threshold. She's dreaming, Anna whispered, reaching out with her senses. Her mother's life force was there, warm and constant, but wrapped in layer upon layer of cold magic. Not dying, dreaming. She's been dreaming for 8 years. Stefan lifted his head, tears still tracking down his pale cheeks. How do we wake her? His voice was hoarse, desperate. I can feel the magic, but I don't know how to unravel it without killing her. It's too complex, too deeply woven. Anna placed her hand over her mother's heart and closed her eyes. In the space where she sensed life forces, Sonia appeared as a ball of warm golden light wrapped in purple thorns. The enchantment wasn't just around her, it had grown into her, parasitic and possessive. Breaking it with force would tear her apart, but Anna could feel something else. The magic was old, tired. It had been holding Sonia for 8 years, sustained by her own life force, and it was exhausted, like a hand that had been clenched too long and ached to open. I can feel it, Anna said. The magic. It's sad, like it's tired of holding her. She looked at Stefan. What if I asked it to let go? Magic doesn't respond to requests, Stefan said, but his voice held desperate hope. It responds to power, to commands, to everything living responds to kindness, Anna interrupted, thinking of the guard sleeping peacefully upstairs. Even magic has a kind of life, doesn't it? It wants something. She didn't wait for Stefan's answer. She reached into that space where magic and life intertwined, found the cold purple thorns wrapped around her mother's warmth, and spoke to them. Not with words, words were too crude, too limited. She spoke with feeling, with understanding, with compassion, for something that had been forced to hold on far longer than it wanted to. You're tired. I know you're tired. You've held her for so long, kept her safe from death, from time, from loss. But you can rest now. Let her go. Let her come home. Please, let her wake up. The purple light flickered. Once, twice. The chains around Sonia's wrists and ankles dimmed, their silver glow fading to shadow. The veins of magic beneath her skin began to recede, pulling back like roots withdrawing from soil. Sonia gasped a full, deep breath that lifted her chest and filled her lungs with air they hadn't tasted in 8 years. Her eyes opened. Hazel, bright, alive, and absolutely terrified. Stefan? Her voice was a rasp, rough from years of silence, but unmistakably her mother's voice, the voice Anna had heard in dreams and memories but never thought she'd hear again. Sonia's gaze found Stefan's face, and tears immediately spilled. Stefan, you're here. You found me. How did you… Then her eyes shifted and found Anna. Everything stopped. The world, time, breath itself seemed to pause as Sonia stared at the 8-year-old girl sitting beside her. Recognition and disbelief and overwhelming grief crashed across her face. Anna? Sonia's hand lifted, trembling, reaching toward Anna's cheek. Anna? My Anna? You're so big. You're so… Her voice broke. I missed everything. Your whole childhood. I missed it all. Anna couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only stare at her mother alive, awake, real until Sonia's arms wrapped around her and pulled her close. Then Anna collapsed into her mother's embrace and felt 8 years of grief and anger and desperate loneliness crack open. Mama, she sobbed into Sonia's shoulder, using a word she hadn't spoken aloud in 3 years. Mama, they told me you were dead. They buried someone and said it was you. I thought you were gone. I'm here, Sonia whispered fiercely, one hand cradling Anna's head, the other wrapped around her back. I'm here, baby. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. She kissed Anna's hair, her forehead, her tear-stained cheeks, as if trying to make up for 8 years of missed goodnight kisses in a single moment. Stefan watched them, his expression naked with joy and pain. Sonia reached out with one hand, and he took it, brought it to his lips, pressed kisses to her knuckles and wrist and palm. "What happened?" Stefan asked, his voice rough. "Sonia, who took you? How did they—" Sonia's expression hardened, transformed from tender to terrible. "Lucien," she spat, and the name was poison on her tongue. "He came the night after you proposed. Said the High Coven had issued an order any child of ours must be destroyed, and I was to be imprisoned until it was born, then executed as an example." Her arms tightened around Anna. "But I bargained, told him about the Daywalker prophecy, convinced him she could be controlled, raised as a weapon for the Coven. He agreed to spare Anna if I submitted to the sleep spell and never tried to contact you. You saved her," Stefan breathed. "I tried," Sonia said, tears streaming freely now. "I tried to send word, tried to fight, but he was too strong. The last thing I remember before the enchantment took me was promising myself that somehow, someday, you'd find each other, that Anna would find her way to you, and you'd protect her when I couldn't. We found each other," Anna said, pulling back just enough to look at her mother's face. "And now we're going to—" The purple candles suddenly flared bright, flames leaping 3 feet high. The door they'd entered through slammed shut with a boom that shook dust from the ceiling, and slow, mocking applause echoed through the chamber. "Beautiful," a voice called from the shadows. Male, cultured, dripping with false warmth. A family reunion. How absolutely touching. A figure stepped into the candlelight. He was tall, nearly Stefan's height, with sharp features that might have been handsome if not for the cruelty carved into every line. His hair was dark as raven wings, his eyes pale crimson like frozen blood. He wore black armor chased with silver filigree, and at his hip hung a sword that radiated malice. "Lucien, dear brother," he said, smiling at Stefan with teeth too white and too sharp. "Thank you for bringing the Daywalker directly to me. I was wondering how I'd lure her out." Stefan surged to his feet, positioning himself between Lucien and the platform. "You did this. You orchestrated everything." "Of course I did," Lucien said, spreading his hands as if it were obvious. "Keep Sonia alive but sleeping. Wait for you to find her eventually. Watch you lead me straight to the girl. The Coven wanted her destroyed in infancy, but I convinced them she'd be more useful grown. A weapon we could control through threats to her mother, or a threat we could publicly execute to terrify any other would-be rule-breakers." His smile widened. "Either way, I win. Either way, the prophecy dies here." Stefan didn't give him time to say more. He launched himself at Lucien with a roar that was more beast than man, his sword appearing in his hand as if summoned from shadow itself. They collided in a clash of steel and fury. Both were ancient vampires, both trained in combat that predated human kingdoms, and they fought with a viciousness born of centuries of resentment. But Lucien whistled sharply, and the shadows themselves seemed to come alive. Vampire guards poured into the chamber from hidden doors, 10, 15, 20 of them, all in black armor, all bearing silver weapons. Stefan was powerful, but outnumbered. He fought brilliantly, brutally, cutting down 3 guards in as many seconds. But more kept coming, pressing him back, separating him from Sonia and Anna. Anna watched her father fight, watched her mother struggle to rise on legs that had been motionless for 8 years. She felt the fear, sharp and cold, felt the rage at Lucien for stealing her family, her childhood, her life, felt the desperate, overwhelming need to protect the 2 people she loved most. And something inside her broke open. Not broke down, broke free. Light exploded from her hands. Golden, blazing, terrible in its beauty. It wasn't fire, exactly, but it burned. It wasn't compulsion, but it commanded. It was pure life force, pure sun blessing, channeled through a child who'd spent 8 years learning to survive in darkness. The guards screamed, throwing their arms up to shield their eyes. Those closest to Anna were thrown backward, their armor scorching, their skin blistering where the light touched. The purple candles went out all at once, plunging the chamber into the golden radiance emanating from Anna's small form. When the light faded, Anna stood at the center of a circle of scorched black stone. Her eyes blazed hazel gold, her hair lifting as if moved by invisible wind. Power rolled off her in waves that made even Stefan take an involuntary step back. Lucien had frozen mid-swing, his sword forgotten, staring at Anna with an expression that might have been fear If vampires could feel such things without irony. The Daywalker, he breathed. It's awake. Anna looked at him, this creature who'd stolen her mother, who'd condemned her to 8 years of poverty and grief, and smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Yes, she said, and her voice echoed with power that seemed to come from the stones themselves. It is. And you made a very, very big mistake. The battle for Ravencross had begun. The monastery was collapsing. Anna's power surge had shattered more than Lucien's guards. It had destabilized the enchantments woven into Ravencross's foundations, the dark magic that had kept the ruin standing for decades past its natural death. Stone groaned. Walls cracked. Dust rained from ceilings that suddenly remembered they were supposed to fall. Move! Stefan grabbed Sonia, lifting her easily despite his injuries. Blood streaked his armor where Lucien's blade had found openings, but he moved with desperate speed. Anna, stay close. Anna ran, her hands still glowing with residual golden light that illuminated their path through corridors rapidly filling with debris. Behind them, she heard Lucien screaming orders, heard the thunder of guards pursuing, heard the building's death scream as centuries of corruption finally caught up with it. They burst into open air as the eastern tower collapsed behind them, sending up a plume of dust and shattered stone. Stefan didn't slow, carrying Sonia toward the cliff edge where the shadow paths waited. Anna followed, her legs burning, her lungs screaming, the golden light in her hands flickering like a dying candle. The shadow path swallowed them just as Ravencross Monastery gave one final groan and collapsed into rubble. Through the darkness between spaces, Anna thought she heard Lucien's furious roar, but distance and magic swallowed the sound. Then they were stumbling into Umbra Keep's courtyard, and Anna's legs gave out. Stefan caught her before she hit the ground, Sonia still cradled in his other arm. "Guards!" he shouted, and vampire soldiers appeared from the shadows. "Get the healers. Now!" The next hours blurred together. Anna was carried to Stefan's private chambers, a vast room with walls lined in tapestries and a bed large enough to sleep 5. Healers came and went, their hands cool against Anna's burning forehead. She was aware of Sonia nearby, equally tended, her voice a constant murmur of reassurance. Stefan paced like a caged wolf, refusing treatment for his own wounds until both Sonia and Anna had been seen to. When Anna finally surfaced from exhaustion's fog, dawn light was creeping through the windows, filtered through heavy curtains, but present. She sat up slowly, her body aching in ways she'd never experienced. Her hands looked normal now. No trace of the golden fire that had poured from them. "What am I?" she whispered to the empty room. "What did I do?" "You saved us," Sonia's voice answered. Anna turned to find her mother sitting in a chair beside the bed, looking pale but alert. She wore borrowed clothes, a simple dress in deep blue, and her hair had been braided. She looked so much like the portrait, like the mother Anna remembered, that Anna's throat tightened. "Mama," Anna breathed, and the words still felt like magic. "You're really here. You're really awake." Sonia moved to the bed, gathered Anna into her arms with the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd missed 8 years of embraces. "I'm here, baby. And I'm not going anywhere. Not ever again." She pulled back just enough to look at Anna's face. "But we need to talk about what you are, what you can do." Over the next hour, sitting in the dawn-touched quiet, Sonia explained what she knew of the Daywalker prophecy. She spoke of ancient texts she'd read while studying healing, of legends passed down through generations of seers, of the moment she'd realized their daughter was the bridge the world had been waiting for. "You're not just vampire and human, Anna," Sonia said, her hands gentle on Anna's shoulders. "You're balance. Life and death, sun and moon, mortal passion and immortal patience. That light you summoned, it's the sun's fire, channeled through you. Vampires fear it because it can destroy them, but it can also heal, protect, create." She smiled sadly. "You're everything the Coven fears and everything they need. That's why they wanted you dead." Before Anna could respond, urgent knocking shook the door. Stefan entered, his wounds bandaged, his expression grim. "Messengers from the Crimson Spire," he said without preamble. "The High Coven has issued a formal summons. I'm required to appear at the Blood Moon Summit in 2 days." His jaw tightened. "If I don't attend, they'll declare me traitor and send armies. If I do attend, they'll demand Anna be surrendered for judgment." "It's a trap," Sonia said flatly. "Of course it's a trap." Stefan moved to the window, stared out at his kingdom. "Lucien has positioned himself perfectly. He discovered the Daywalker, rescued the Coven from a prophesied threat. Now he offers me a choice. Give up you both and keep my throne, or defy the coven and lose everything: throne, lands, allies, life. Then we don't go, Anna said. We fight them here where we're strongest. And watch this kingdom burn? Stefan turned to face her. Watch innocent vampires my people slaughtered because their king defied the coven? No. We go to the summit. But we go prepared. The next 2 days were the most intense of Anna's life. Stefan trained her relentlessly, teaching her to control the power that had exploded from her so violently. In the castle's training yard, she learned to summon the golden light in small bursts, enough to illuminate, to warm, but not to destroy. She practiced sensing threats, distinguishing between different types of vampires by their cold signatures. She learned to shield her mind more effectively, to turn away compulsion like water off stone. But control was difficult. The power responded to emotion, and Anna was a storm of fear and rage and desperate hope. More than once, she lost control and sent light blasting across the training yard, scorching stone and sending Stefan diving for cover. It's too much, Anna said after one particularly violent outburst left her sobbing with exhaustion. I can't control it. What if I hurt someone at the summit? What if I prove them right about me being dangerous? Sonia knelt beside her, pulled her close. Then we'll deal with it. Together. She brushed tears from Anna's cheeks. But Anna, there's something you need to know. Something I learned while I slept. She explained then about her gift, dormant seer blood, that had manifested during her enchanted imprisonment. I dreamed while I slept, Sonia said softly. Dreamed of you growing up, of futures branching like tree roots. In some futures, you destroy the vampire world not from malice, but from fear and anger. In others, you save it, show them a path to evolution they couldn't see alone. And in a few precious ones, her voice caught. In a few, you bridge both worlds and create something new, something beautiful. Which future is real? Anna asked. All of them, none of them. Sonia took Anna's hands. The choice is yours, sweetheart. The prophecy says you can unite or destroy, but it doesn't say you must do either. You're not bound by fate. You're just offered possibilities. The journey to the Blood Moon summit felt like riding toward execution. They traveled openly, Stefan, Sonia, Anna, and a small guard of Stefan's most loyal soldiers. The crimson spire rose in the distance like a blade of black glass thrust into the earth's heart. Along the road, they passed vampire scouts watching from shadows, their presence a constant reminder that the coven had eyes everywhere. The spire was even more imposing up close. Black glass walls reflected nothing, absorbed all light. Guards in crimson armor lined the entrance, their faces expressionless as Stefan's party approached. Inside, the air was thick with power and ancient prejudice. The great chamber took Anna's breath. It was circular, vast enough to hold hundreds, with a dome of red glass high overhead that turned sunlight into blood-colored illumination. 13 thrones formed a semicircle at the far end, ornate, ancient, radiating power. Every other available space was packed with vampire nobility and elaborate finery, all turning to stare as Stefan entered with his family. The whispers started immediately. Daywalker. Abomination. The end of days. Anna felt their fear like physical weight, pressing against her from all sides. She wanted to run, to hide, to disappear. But Sonia's hand squeezed hers, and Stefan walked tall, and Anna forced herself to match their courage. On the central throne sat Lady Isadora, and she was terrifying in a way Lucien couldn't match. She was ancient, truly ancient, her face beautiful but cold as winter marble. Her eyes were black diamonds, absorbing everything, revealing nothing. She wore robes of deepest crimson, and power rolled off her in waves that made even other vampires flinch. Lucien stood at her right hand, his armor polished, his expression triumphant. When he saw them, he smiled all teeth and cruelty. Stefan stepped forward and spoke with formal precision. I invoke the right of testimony. Ancient law grants me the right to speak before judgment is passed. Lady Isadora inclined her head fractionally. Speak, Stefan of Umbra Keep. The coven will hear your words. Stefan told them everything. His voice never wavered as he described meeting Sonia, falling in love, the proposal. He detailed Lucien's conspiracy with cold fury, the kidnapping, the faked death, the enchanted imprisonment. He presented evidence, magical traces analyzed by his court mages, testimony from servants who'd seen Lucien at Ravencross, the enchantment signature that matched Lucien's documented spellwork. When he finished, silence filled the chamber. Then Lucien laughed. My brother tells a compelling story, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly. And I deny none of it. Yes, I took Sonia. Yes, I imprisoned her. Yes, I faked her death. He turned to face the assembled vampires. Because I was protecting our kind from extinction. The prophecy is clear, the Daywalker will destroy us, or force us to kneel to mortals. I contained the threat. I saved us all. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Anna felt her stomach clench. Lady Isadora's dark eyes fixed on Anna. Child, she said, her voice like frozen honey. Step forward. Anna's legs trembled, but she obeyed. Sonia started to follow, but Stefan held her back with a gentle hand. This was Anna's moment. You claim to be neither threat nor weapon, Lady Isadora continued. But you glow with the sun's fire. You break our enchantments. You exist in defiance of natural law. Why should we believe you won't destroy us? Anna looked up at this ancient vampire who'd ruled before Anna's grandmother's grandmother was born. She thought of all the carefully prepared speeches Stefan had helped her practice. Then she threw them away and spoke from her heart. I don't want to destroy anyone, she said, her voice small but steady. I just wanted my mom back. I just wanted to stop hurting. She looked around at hundreds of faces, beautiful, terrible, ancient faces, all watching her with fear. You're all scared of me because I'm different. But my whole life, humans have been scared of you. Maybe that's what the prophecy means. Maybe I'm not supposed to destroy or save anyone. Maybe I'm just supposed to show you that different doesn't have to mean dangerous. Silence. Then Lucien stood, his expression twisted with contempt. Words of a child, he sneered. Lady Isadora, I invoke the right of challenge. Let Stefan prove his pet abomination is safe. Single combat if he wins, his family goes free. If I win, the girl dies. The assembly roared approval. Bloodsport wrapped in ancient law. Stefan's hand found his sword. I accept. They met in the chamber's center. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Centuries of brotherhood turned to hatred, crystallized in this single moment. Then they moved. The fight was brutal. Stefan fought with skill and honor, his blade singing as it cut through air. But Lucien fought dirty blood magic, forbidden techniques, attacks that broke every rule of honorable combat. Within minutes, Stefan was bleeding from a dozen wounds, driven back, forced to his knees. You always were weak, brother, Lucien hissed, raising his blade for the killing blow. Too human, too soft. No! Anna's scream tore from her throat, and her power exploded. But this time, it wasn't rage. It wasn't fear. It was pure, desperate love for Stefan, for Sonia, for the family she'd just found and refused to lose again. Golden light erupted from her hands, but instead of destroying, it protected. A dome of radiance surrounded Stefan, stopping Lucien's blade inches from his throat. The light spread outward, washing over the assembled vampires like a wave. And they didn't burn. For the first time in their immortal lives, vampires felt sunlight, real sunlight, filtered through Anna's power and the red glass dome, and it was warm, gentle. It illuminated rather than destroyed, revealed beauty rather than burned it away. The chamber filled with crimson gold radiance, and hundreds of ancient creatures gasped, wept, reached toward light they'd feared for millennia. Anna stood at the center of it all, her eyes blazing gold, channeling the sun's fire through love rather than fury. Around her, vampires knelt or stood frozen in wonder, experiencing something they'd thought lost forever. Lady Isadora rose slowly from her throne, staring at the light with ancient eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. The prophecy, she whispered. Not destruction, transformation. She looked at Anna, and for the first time, her expression held something other than cold authority. It held hope. Child, Lady Isadora said, her voice carrying through the silent chamber. You have done what no vampire has achieved in 10,000 years. You've shown us the sun without demanding we burn for the privilege. She turned to Lucien, who stood frozen, his blade still raised, his face twisted in shock and dawning horror. And you, Lady Isadora said, voice cold with fury. You would have destroyed our salvation to cling to your fear. You would have killed the bridge that could carry us from eternal night into blessed twilight. She gestured sharply. Coven guards materialized from shadows, seized Lucien's arms. He struggled, screaming protests, but the assembled vampires watched in silence as their champion was dragged away. The light faded slowly, leaving the chamber in normal darkness. But something had changed. Everything had changed. Vampires looked at each other with new eyes, touched their own skin, as if seeing it for the first time. They'd felt the sun's warmth without pain, and that single moment had shattered 10,000 years of certainty about what they were, what they could never be. Lady Isadora descended from her throne and knelt before Anna, a gesture so shocking that gasps echoed through the chamber. "Daywalker," she said formally. "Bridge between worlds. The Coven recognizes your right to exist. More, we acknowledge our need for what you represent." She rose and addressed the assembly. "The old ways have failed us. We have ruled through fear and isolation, and it has made us brittle, unable to change. This child offers us flexibility, growth, the possibility of walking in light without abandoning our nature." Her diamond eyes swept the crowd. "Any who oppose this new path may leave now, but know that the Coven's protection leaves with you." No one moved. Lady Isadora nodded, satisfied. She looked at Stefan, bloodied but unbowed. At Sonia, tears streaming down her face. At Anna, exhausted and small and impossibly powerful. "Welcome," she said, "to the first dawn of a new age." Lady Isadora's pronouncement echoed through the Crimson Spire with the weight of ancient law. "Lucian of Umbra Keep, you are hereby stripped of rank, title, and honor. Your crimes, conspiracy against royal blood, kidnapping, false testimony, and attempted murder, condemn you to the sunless depths." Her voice carried no mercy. "There, in absolute darkness, you will have eternity to contemplate the salvation you tried to destroy." Lucian's screams faded as the guards dragged him deeper into the spire. Anna watched him go and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, just exhaustion and the desperate need for this to be over. "The child," Lady Isadora continued, turning her diamond gaze to Anna. "The Daywalker. The Coven formally recognizes her as Stefan's heir and grants her a new classification. Neither vampire nor human, but bridge between worlds. Unprecedented, dangerous, and absolutely essential to our survival." Relief flooded through Anna, but it was short-lived. "However," Lady Isadora said, and the word fell like a blade, "such power requires oversight. The child will remain in vampire territory under Coven supervision. We must study her abilities, understand her nature, ensure the prophecy's destructive path remains unfulfilled." "No," Stefan's voice cut through the chamber's murmurs. He moved to stand beside Anna, placing himself between her and the assembled Coven. "She's my daughter, not your experiment. I will not surrender her to be poked and tested like some curiosity." "Then you would deny the Coven's rightful concern?" Lady Isadora's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the chamber dropped. "After we've granted her life, I would deny you the right to cage her." Stefan's crimson eyes blazed. "She's proven herself, shown you light without demanding you burn. That should be enough." Tension crackled through the air. Anna felt dozens of vampire signatures around her, poised between support and hostility. One wrong word could shatter the fragile peace they'd just won. "A compromise," Sonia said, stepping forward. Her voice was steady despite her obvious exhaustion. "Anna lives at Umbra Keep, receives education from both vampire and human tutors, and periodically demonstrates her abilities for Coven observers. Not imprisonment, not unlimited access. Supervised growth with protected autonomy." Lady Isadora considered this for a long moment. Finally, she inclined her head. "Acceptable. The child will report to the Crimson Spire twice yearly for evaluation. Any sign of instability, any threat to the Coven's interests, and this arrangement ends." She looked at Anna. "Do you accept these terms?" Anna thought about what freedom really meant, about the difference between a cage and a home with locked doors for protection. "I accept," she said, "but I won't be your weapon. I won't hurt people just because you're afraid of them." "Noted," Lady Isadora said, and something that might have been respect flickered in her ancient eyes. "Then this matter is concluded. The Blood Moon Summit is adjourned." The journey back to Umbra Keep felt different than the journey away. They'd left as fugitives racing toward probable death. They returned as something new, a family recognized, a bridge acknowledged, a hope tentatively embraced. But that evening, in Stefan's private chambers where exhaustion finally caught up with them, Lady Isadora's final offer hung heavy in the air. "She spoke to me before we left," Sonia said quietly. She sat by the window, moonlight painting her features in silver and shadow. "Lady Isadora, she offered me the vampiric embrace, death and rebirth as an immortal, so I could remain with you, with both of you forever." Stefan, who'd been tending the fire, went absolutely still. "And," his voice was carefully controlled, "and I told her I needed time to think." Sonia looked at her hands, at the lines just beginning to form at her knuckles. I'm 28 now. I have maybe 40 years left if I'm lucky. You have eternity. She met Stefan's eyes. But I've already lost 8 years. 8 years of Anna's childhood, of watching her grow, of being there when she needed me. I don't want to skip to the end. I want to live the years I have left, every single day, not trade them for forever. Stefan crossed to her, knelt, took her hands in his. Then that's what we'll do, he said simply. However many years you have, I'll treasure each one. And when? His voice caught. When your time comes, I'll face it knowing I loved you completely in the time we had. Anna, watching from her seat by the fire, felt tears spill down her cheeks. Her mother choosing mortality, her father accepting that choice, it was the most powerful magic she'd ever witnessed. But the world didn't pause for family moments. The next morning, Stefan made an announcement that shook vampire society to its foundations. I will not rule as an absolute king, he declared to the assembled nobles in Keep's great hall. The old ways have failed us, maintaining power through fear and isolation. Instead, I'm establishing the Twilight Council, a governing body with representatives from vampire nobility, human territories, and eventually other supernatural communities. My kingdom will be the first to experiment with shared power. The hall erupted. Some vampires roared approval. Others called it treason, weakness, the beginning of the end. But Stefan stood firm, and his most loyal supporters rallied behind him. If my daughter is a bridge, he said when the chaos finally settled, then I will build the road she walks on, even if it means tearing down walls that have stood for millennia. Anna's new life began to take shape. Tutors arrived, both vampire and human. She learned vampire history from ancient scholars who remembered the events they described. She learned combat from Stefan's weapons master, not brutal vampire technique but precision and honor. She studied magic theory with mages who were terrified and fascinated by her in equal measure. But she also had human teachers. Mrs. Cora, recovered from the gray fever thanks to medicine Anna had eventually stolen from Keep's stores, taught her about human resilience and community. A scholar from Ashwick's University taught her literature, science, philosophy, the accumulated knowledge of mortal minds who knew their time was limited and made every thought count. It was lonely sometimes. The vampire children newly turned, frozen at various young ages, saw her as too human, too warm, too mortal. The human children from Ashwick's lower districts, invited to study alongside her as part of Stefan's reforms, saw her as too powerful, too other, too vampire. Anna existed in the space between, belonging fully to neither world. But slowly, painfully, wonderfully, she learned that maybe belonging nowhere meant she could belong everywhere. The family grew together through awkward dinners and stilted conversations. Stefan had no idea how to be a father, kept offering to teach Anna battle strategies when she just wanted him to braid her hair. Sonia struggled with the years she'd missed, catching herself treating Anna like a 5-year-old when Anna was nearly 9. Anna battled resentment and abandonment issues that surfaced at unexpected moments, but they persisted. Stefan learned that fatherhood sometimes meant sitting quietly while Anna cried, offering presents instead of solutions. Sonia discovered that the daughter she'd lost to time had survived and grown strong without her, which was both devastating and a source of fierce pride. Anna learned to let them in, to trust that they wouldn't vanish again. One morning, Anna woke them both before dawn. I want to try something, she said, leading them to the eastern parapet, the highest point of Keep. As the sun began to rise, painting the horizon in shades of gold and rose and amber, Anna extended her power. The golden light flowed from her hands like water, creating a filter around them, crimson gold radiance that transformed the deadly sun into something gentle. Stefan, who hadn't watched a sunrise in 300 years, stepped into the light. It washed over his pale skin, warm but not burning, illuminating rather than destroying. He raised his face toward the growing dawn, and tears tracked down his cheeks like liquid diamonds. I'd forgotten, he whispered. I'd forgotten how beautiful it was. Sonia took his hand. Anna stood between them, the living bridge, and felt something in her chest expand until she thought she might burst with the perfection of this moment. Her family, whole and together, watching the sun rise on a world that was learning to change. News of the Daywalker spread beyond vampire territories. Human kingdoms sent emissaries, some curious, some cautious, all wondering what Anna's existence meant for the tenuous peace between species. Other supernatural beings emerged from hiding, werewolf packs who'd maintained neutrality for centuries, fae courts who'd retreated to their hidden realms, witch covens who practiced their arts in secret, all asking the same question. Does this change everything? Not everyone celebrated. Vampire traditionalists plotted in shadows, calling Stefan a traitor and Anna an abomination. Human zealots preached that she was a demon wearing a child's face, but others more and more each day saw hope. If a vampire king could love a human woman, if a child could walk in both worlds without destroying either, maybe the barriers that had divided them for millennia were never as solid as they'd believed. On Anna's 9th birthday, Lady Isadora sent a gift, a letter offering Anna a choice. When she reached maturity, she could undergo the vampiric embrace and become immortal, or remain mortal and age naturally. The decision was hers alone. Anna read the letter twice, then tucked it away. I have time, she told Stefan and Sonia over birthday cake, a human tradition Stefan had researched extensively. For now, I just want to be alive. I'll figure out what kind of life I want later. Stefan commissioned a new portrait. The painter worked for weeks, capturing not just likenesses but essences. When it was finally unveiled in the gallery, Anna gasped. The portrait showed all three of them. Anna stood between her parents, Stefan's hand on her shoulder, Sonia's arm around her waist. In the painting, Anna glowed faintly with golden light, and behind them, the window showed both sunset and moonrise, twilight, the in-between time that belonged to neither day nor night, but was beautiful in its own right. One evening, Anna stood in the gallery, looking between both portraits, the old one of Sonia crowned and alone, and the new one of their family together. Footsteps behind her announced Stefan's arrival. Which one is real? Anna asked without turning. Stefan came to stand beside her, studying both paintings with ancient eyes. Both, he said finally. One is what was stolen. The other is what we built from the ruins. Anna nodded slowly, thinking of all the futures her mother had dreamed while imprisoned in magical sleep. Destruction, salvation, bridge. The prophecy had given her possibilities, not destiny. I think, she said slowly, I want to build more. Not just be the bridge, but build the roads, the houses, the places where people from both worlds can meet and be safe. She looked up at Stefan. I want to see what happens when we stop being scared of each other. Stefan rested his hand on her shoulder, warm despite his vampire nature. Then that's what we'll do, he promised. Together. They stood in the gallery as twilight filled the windows, crimson and gold, shadow and light. The uncertain, beautiful space where transformation happens. Outside, the world was changing. Some changes would be violent. Some would fail. But others would take root and grow into something unprecedented. Inside, a family was healing, learning to live with the years that had been stolen and the years they'd been given, learning that love didn't erase trauma but could build something strong enough to bear its weight. And somewhere between outside and inside, between past and future, between human and vampire, a prophecy was being rewritten one choice at a time. Anna took one last look at the portraits, then turned toward the door where Sonia waited, smiling. Come on, Anna said. Mrs. Cora is coming for dinner, and you promised to teach me that soup recipe. Stefan followed, and as they left the gallery, the candles flickered in approval. The castle itself, ancient witness to centuries of darkness, to violence and fear, and lonely kings mourning in empty halls, seemed to be learning to welcome the light. The portrait of the lonely queen remained on the wall, a reminder of what had been stolen, but beside it now hung the portrait of a family, proof that even from the ruins of conspiracy and loss, something beautiful could grow. The sun set, the moon rose, and in the space between, where twilight painted the world in shades of possibility, a daywalker walked, neither destroying nor saving, but simply being, simply living, simply showing both worlds that different didn't have to mean dangerous, that bridges could be homes instead of battlefields, that the in-between spaces were where the most interesting stories began. Thank you so much for joining us on Anna's journey. If you love this story, please give it a like and share it with anyone who enjoys vampire romance and powerful family stories. Also, subscribe to our channel for more epic tales like this one.